It's recording. You're set.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Is there anybody on the committee who is going to be able to preside in person over the committee meeting tonight?
Well, I will, because I have the agenda in front of me and I was more or less controlling it again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
That would be great. Absolutely.
You
can take the lead
okay.
on the policies. They are recommendations from the administration.
Thank you.
But before we do that, can we get a roll call vote, please? Connor Kurtz here via telephone.
Carol Bites is here, board member.
Mike Wolf. And Rich Martino.
Megan Weber.
And Mary Beth Torsha. That's it. We're all in attendance.
All right, great. If we could move on then on the agenda.
Okay, I just want to make sure Mrs. Bites has one. An agenda. All right, I think she found it.
All right,
okay.
Great.
I'm starting with the first one, under old business, 2.1, policy number 915, the Booster Support Organization. I would like to go over the changes that we made from the last meeting, or the revisions rather, and then move on to the, oh my goodness, the guideline and discuss that. So, if we look at policy 915 that has a draft, do you have a copy of that in front of you, Connor?
I'm pulling it up now.
Okay.
All right, I see the draft policy.
Right. And I have in blue on my copy. Does everybody all right? Those were the changes or the additions, revisions that we made to this policy. There was nothing on the first page that we had changed or revised. On page 2, under the guidelines, we added that the board requires from each group the school-related community organization's annual report, a list of current officers, including contact information and a current statement of bylaws, objectives of the group, and we added and a copy of approved budgets, and that we wanted those budgets to be submitted by August 31st of every year. And then if you go down a little bit further, funds raised through Boosters fundraising efforts may not be used to pay student activity fees. We added that. And then there were 3 other items under the responsibilities of the district towards the end of page 2 that we added. The school-related community organizations may not use district federal ID number or sales tax exemption. School-related community organizations must comply with all state and federal regulations regarding accounting practices and fundraising. And school-related community organizations purchasing any gifts, equipment, or a uniform which requires installation, storage, or maintenance shall require board approval. Any such equipment and uniform shall become the property of the district. So those 3 things we added. If you go on to page 4, that the appropriate chain of command, we added step 5, the board.
Can I just jump in right there?
Yes.
If we could change the word from just board to board of school directors.
Absolutely.
I think that would be good, just so we can keep it fairly uniform throughout our policies.
Not a problem. And then on page 5, under requirements, we added under number 2 that provide minutes of meetings to the school district website for public view within 5 days of approval, which absolutely was not a problem with our organization. So that concludes the revisions that we made to the board policy itself. Any questions from the committee? I think we went through that pretty much with a fine-tooth comb when we were working on this last month.
Now, the organizations, have they been spoken to about these changes? Have they been consulted?
Yeah, they were here last meeting, and really we went through this with mostly the sports and the PTC. I think they were the ones representative. So
right, and I have been corresponding with the music boosters through Mr. Potts and Mrs. Wolf to convey anything, but there weren't really big changes that affected music. And Mrs. Bites, are you okay so far? I know you. Okay, yes. I wanted to make sure you're on board. So yes, they have been all reported to, and we also didn't look at, because we didn't include the Blazer Foundation under the definition on page 1, Connor, is because they really don't meet the same criteria. They were a little bit different, and we have to treat that Blazer Foundation differently. So that's why we didn't list them as part of our organizations.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good. The only one question I have, and I'm looking through it again here, is just is there going to be some type of formal agreement the district enters into with the support organization? Because I'm wondering, especially with the disband/cease to operate criterion on page 5, if an organization disbands or they don't really, or the district doesn't recognize them or whatever, how can we legally lay claim to those assets that, per our policy, are to be transferred back to the district? We
cannot lay claim to those funds or assets, but by their bylaws or by the laws that they have to follow, if they fold, they have to turn their money over to another nonprofit organization. So, yes. So they have their own clause, and knowing that their monies would be tied to our school, it would have to go to the next, whoever it would be, whether it be booster. It cannot come a part of our general fund, from what I understand.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm nitpicking, because I'm not sure if you said it has to go to another nonprofit organization?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Right.
Would the district
Yes.
that?
I'm sorry.
Okay,
yes, sure.
all right.
But I'm sorry, and I did misinterpret. It would sit with us knowing that those funds would have to go to another nonprofit. So the money rolls over to ours. It sits in like a special revenue account, and that then monies has to be turned back over. So if Sports Boosters disbands, but Music Boosters is still in full operation, then money would go to that nonprofit or PTC or any of the other ones. So that's how I'm understanding that.
Okay, because the only question that I have, and I think I brought this up before, and if it is addressed or it has been sufficiently addressed for the other committee members, feel free to cut me off. But my only thought is, if they decide that they don't want to really be a booster organization anymore, they're their own legal entity. They don't have to give the money back to the district, even though our policy says they do, because they don't need to follow our policies because they're on their own. The only detriment that could come to them for not following our policy is that we don't recognize them as the official booster.
But by law, they have to give their money to another nonprofit. So it becomes... We can't mandate that it becomes us. We're trying to through our policy, but when I did the investigation through the consulting, I want to say taxes, I believe, that was the way that I understood the language, that they have to send their money to another nonprofit. We would like to be the holders of it, and I think that they respectfully would do that, to be honest with you.
All right. Well, if it's not going to be, if we don't think it's an issue, all right, I'll just close on one thing. Maybe a solution would be, and this might be too complicated, but have a contractual agreement between district and the organization saying that if they choose to disband or whatever criteria are met, then the money would go to the district. If it's a contract, I think we'll have some certainty in knowing that it'll come to Daniel Boone and not just some other nonprofit. That's just something to consider. But otherwise, I'm fine with this policy if we're ready to move it forward.
My only question was, how do we should have something from the organizations to know they exist. There should be some type of registration process, or at least a form that someone has to fill out saying that they're going to be doing this activity in the district, so we know who they are. So they have to acknowledge that they read this, agreed to it, and understand it, and will comply. So
maybe we add that to the guidelines and include a registration so that they can register their...
Right, just as an acknowledgement that they're going to operate based on this policy.
Okay, so...
I thought the purpose was that we would certify them as a Daniel Boone, official Daniel Boone.
Unless they come to you and ask to be certified, how would you know?
Right.
So I just want to...
No, that's what I say. I think what you're saying is the way it should be.
Do I want to call it an application, or do I want to just?
It's just something simple, saying it's what the organization is. And
I have a question about that.
Excuse me one second, Carol, and then you could even, in that, have a line toward the end that says, should they disband, that they will turn the funds over in accordance with the policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I will look and see if there's anything like that, and I'll do some type of research before our next meeting to be able to provide that application. And then by then, hopefully, we'll be done with this. So.
I have a quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Under the guideline, I know we're getting to guidelines. Wouldn't that be covered in the guidelines, like number 1, where it says copy of bylaws, statement of purpose on file? For one thing, we should be requiring this stuff annually, right?
We should. We
It should be an annual process. Because if there's a change to their bylaws or statement of purpose, we should be informed. So it could be at the same time that they formally present their copy of their bylaws or statement, it should be incorporated in there, their statement that they're committing to the rules and guide, the person in charge of that organization.
So maybe what I could do here is just add a line.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
It just follows in with this part of the process.
An annual's a good idea because if their leadership, their officers turn over,
Yep.
you'd want the affirmation from the new officers.
So
Probably,
okay.
if the deadline for submitting their budgets are August 31st, so there'll be at some point around that budget submission time that they should be coming to us and giving us the requirements according to these guidelines.
most people they're not going to change their bylaws, so it should be
right. So it would be rather
those.
Routine, yes.
Right.
But we get to see face to face who the head of the organization is that year.
The only question is, I don't know when they get the audit. Like I know the Music Boosters have theirs. Someone an accountant audits them, but I don't know when that is.
Well, we could the things that aren't applicable to hand in at the time of the application or the early submission or the introduction.
I guess the application.
I mean,
having their registration.
Registration.
They're going to have all that because they have to maintain their tax exempt status. The only way they can do that is to have all these things like the audit and things done. I think those are required.
So we may be looking at
we addressed that, and they have to be charitable organizations in here. So as long as they're meeting that standard,
right.
So
if they're producing an annual audit for the organization and they're audited in April, then in August they would just present with their last audit.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an August audit. We're moving into the guidelines here, and I didn't.
No, and if we were okay with the policy part, the guideline was the next piece. Okay.
Didn't we have and I can't find my notes at this moment, a discussion about an item on a budget over as soon as
we did, and then we didn't. We it went back and forth according to my notes. Were we going to say 5%? Were we not?
Above budget.
Whatever. Yeah. That was their
items, idea. Individual single purchases over $1,000.
Right.
Would need board approval on anything over their budget. They were all on board with that.
Right.
So, yeah, we're going to submit budgets with
$1 over their budget.
$1 over budget. Any over budget items must come to the board for approval. But they're going to build themselves in the flexibility that they think they need when they get the budget.
Okay, so did I leave out wordage after?
I think so.
The board requires from each group the school-related community organization's annual report, a list of current officers, including contact information or current statement by bylaws, objectives of the group, and a copy of approved budgets. So after approved budgets, I want to add these approved, once budgets are approved.
I don't quite know how to put that in there. Any over budget item must be submitted to the board for approval prior to purchase. Maybe it's in
Items not, or additional items.
any items over budget.
Shouldn't it just be a budget surplus?
Was that?
Wouldn't it just be called
Spending in
budget
addition
surplus?
to the budget.
Yep. Must be
Spending
approval
in addition
prior to the spending.
to
It's not
the
FYI, it's
budget must be submitted. does it have to be board approval or or administrative? That was the other, yeah.
As long as it's you, as long as the business office is keeping track of the numbers is what we were
And submit it to superintendent or designee prior to purchase. And I'll put that in right after the blue period. And a copy of approved budgets. And then we'll say spending in addition to the budget must be submitted to superintendent or designee prior to purchase.
Or designate for approval prior to purchase.
I'm sorry.
For approval prior to purchase.
Right.
Because they could just figure if they set it in, it's sufficient.
It kind of
Say
fits
it
in
one more
with the
time.
next paragraph.
Say it one more time.
For approval prior to purchase.
I would put it as its own paragraph there.
Okay.
Between the board requires and the purchase of equipment. It's just another kind of separate item. Call attention to.
Okay.
And that,
In excess, not in addition to.
good point.
Spending in excess. Okay.
Are you an English teacher? Okay.
And there's nothing controversial about that. We all approved that at the last meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I had all sorts of notes there, and then I crossed things out because we went back and forth. Were we doing 5%? Weren't we doing 10%? Then it kind of stopped, and we just decided. But I think this is what we really decided on. I missed
prefer
that.
a hard number rather than a percentage, because
Right.
a percentage of a big number could be a big problem.
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, I believe we have.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Do
Thank
we
you
need
for your.
to agree to move that forward? Those changes?
Why don't I bring it to the next policy meeting one more time, because we're going to have some changes probably to the guidelines, and then after that meeting we could bring it forward.
Right. We were going to work on guidelines.
Yeah, if that would be okay with everyone.
That sounds good.
All right. So for under the guidelines, I'm getting that would you like me underneath organization to add, and Connor, are you there? Are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, sorry. You'll have to just stop me when you want me to stop being in control. I have a...
Oh, no, this is good. This is nice.
All right.
Thank you.
Breathe heavy, Connor.
Yeah. Where it says organization, would you like me to make a subtitle saying annual submission of the following? Copy of bylaws, president of the organization, treasurer of the organization. Do you want me to list something? Do you want me to have them submit?
That would be helpful. That would be helpful, I think, for them to just see it listed somewhere instead of buried in the text.
Right.
It makes it more clear, I think, of what they need to do to fill out instead of trying to interpret what we're asking for.
Okay, so I can list that we would like annual submission of the following: copy of bylaws, president of the organization, and treasurer of the organization, so that we know who they are. And did you want me to add there something about them, what we were talking about, the application to be an organization within our district, or
Like a re-registration or registration, unless it's included in their statement of purpose. Which, I'm sorry, I didn't look at any statement of purposes.
Yeah.
Would it be that comprehensive where it spelled those things out?
I don't know, because I didn't even think about that with regard to this. I just assumed, since we kind of listed them on our initial policy, that if they were completing this, that this was their recognition. So maybe...
If not, then I think it's appropriate to say like a registration, and not only annually, but I think we should specify by what date we expect them to have these documents in.
Okay.
Which should tie into the August 31st date, right?
Yeah.
What you were going to word under organization isn't going to read right.
No. I was going to...
The only thing you would do annually would be the copy of bylaws or statement of purpose. The other two things don't.
And I would say up-to-date bylaws. It's not like people don't change their bylaws frequently.
But it's still a measure to make them stop and make sure that if there was a change, that we're notified.
No, but what I'm saying is that could be submitted annually, number one, but not 2 or 3.
Yeah. No, right. No, she just said the names of them.
Yeah, but she was.
Yeah, I was thinking. I was thinking that we wanted it under organization, but if I should maybe go above organization and say annual submission of the following updated
the registration process.
Right. This page, there was no real concern as I reviewed it, talking to the boosters organization. The only thing that they were concerned about and wanted to be clear was on number 7, where it says checks are signed by the treasurer and president. They don't often purchase only with checks, and their checks are already pre-printed and don't have signature places for both. So it would be better if it says checks are signed by the treasurer or the president, because they use a debit card for a lot of their purchases because they're trying to do things quicker. PTC, probably uses checks a little bit more. I'm not sure how. It just would be an added. It would be an added expense to them if we would require them to have 2 people. But somewhere when they're filling out their own paperwork, they do have responsibility of checks and balances and making sure that one person isn't the sole person that's allowed to authorize the purchase. So if we could change that from and to or, that would be great.
I'm okay with that, as long as they have their internal controls
Yep.
in place, which I'm sure they will. Is that okay with you, Connor? Signed by treasurer.
Can you repeat that one more time?
It's number 7, and when you read number 7, it says checks are signed by the treasurer and president. We would like to change and to or.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
If we're
Yeah.
talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars organizations, that becomes
Right.
very important.
I would think so, yeah. And they're not,
It's not practical.
no, and they're not dealing with that large amount of money that I know of at any one time. And then what I'll try to do is I'll look at this and see where else, how I can add
The report.
how they're applying to the organization within the district.
Just be aware 2 and 3 are redundant on reporting.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if there's another, if it's supposed to be a different.
Yeah, no, it was just I think it was just a mistake.
Yeah, it's good enough for me for now. As we go, we might want to
Right.
revise that a little, tweak it here and there, but I think all the basics are really covered in the
Okay.
2 sections, and I appreciate your work on this.
No problem. Kelly, just to bring you up to date, the work that we did last time, we've reviewed it, and we just had one little tweak to what we had in there, and it was back to the part, it was on page 2, where we were talking about once your budget is in, we're putting a paragraph that says spending in excess to the budget must be submitted to the superintendent or designee for approval prior to purchases. Okay, that was just one tweak that we were putting into there, but everything else that we discussed at the last meeting, the committee is good with, and so we'll get this pretty finished up soon. And then we were talking about the school-related, the administrative guideline that we're going to change. We're going to add something where we would like to see an annual submission of bylaws, updated bylaws if they've been updated. So we're just going to have something there, and we're also going to try to come up with some type of statement that you're like applying, that we, the sports boosters, are applying to. I guess we could have like a blank and have them fill in who they are to.
The certification statement.
Okay.
Just sort of certify their commitment to adhering to the bylaws and functioning within the existing policies of the district. You comfortable with that?
I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. And we'll get the verbiage on that. At the next
Yeah.
meeting.
The whole purpose of it is to actually sanction the individual booster clubs. That's all it is.
Right. And then that if you would disband, that you agree to give the money to the district to allot to another nonprofit organization. That would be the understanding.
Right.
So
We would hold the funding
Yep.
until the decision was made to send to a like organization.
exactly.
also.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought it'd be good to spell that out once a year at the kind of re-registration time.
Yeah. And then where it says checks are signed by the treasurer and president, we're changing that from and to or, so that the checks are signed by the treasurer or the President. And I explained that I know that your organization uses a debit card, your checks are already pre-printed, that, you know, that would be a problem. Obviously, you have your own checks and balances within the organization to make sure that this, you know, somebody's not allowed to just have.
And it's nice with the online banking. It's not like you're waiting for a monthly statement. So I can go in and look at the statement. The treasurer can go in and look at the statement. You would see anything that's happening right away.
Right.
So technology has kind of updated.
Right. It seems like an undue burden for
So.
the organization.
All right, I think we're done with policy, or with this, the booster policy.
Great. So we're looking to get that on the agenda we're going to have it on the next policy meeting, and then we can put it on to the full board, hopefully, after that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And we just went in the dark because of our our lights. Okay. Yes, that would be correct, Connor. The next policy that is on here, it's the use of school facilities, all of those. I'm going to ask the committee if we can table those until the facilities committee is prepared to make recommendations. We have ongoing discussion going on in the facilities committee with regards to the use of the facilities. So I'm not ready to sit here and work with this group in order to change any policy until that committee is somewhere. So if you don't mind me pushing that off to the next agenda, that would be great.
Yeah, we don't need to be working against that committee.
Right. So the next one that I have up then is the policy. It's the it's the video and audio surveillance number 820. That's a policy that we have had adopted prior to the video audio that we just did, because we never had audio. And I kind of feel like this policy,
You never had video.
we never had audio on the buses, nor did we ever have audio in buildings or any place. And this policy, I believe, was a policy that might have been adopted when they first put video on buses. And it seems to be, I put it on here to discuss, review, or revise, or do we just get rid of this one because it's very right. And maybe what I'd like to just say to the committee is, would you mind taking time, not tonight necessarily, but reviewing this so that we could put it on and make any recommendations at the next policy committee? Because I think it's a lot to ask you to read, but that's the purpose why it was there, was because I can't see any other reason that it was on other than when we first started having video on buses. So it's number 820, and it's called Video Audio Surveillance, and it was adopted back in 1998.
How much different is this from 808?
It's not completely different, but it alludes a little bit like to not a bus once in a while, which made me think that it might have been, but I don't think we had video. I didn't think our cameras or security cameras were in our buildings in 1998. That seems like that would have been a long time ago.
So what I'm understanding is you think this should be deleted.
I do. But I don't want to, I would rather give the committee an opportunity to review it and be able to come back to me and say, I agree, I think it's a repeat of 8.1 or whatever that number was.
Do we have another policy governing audio and video recording in our buildings?
We do not, but we don't have.
In high school, we have video.
Which number is it?
Right, but I couldn't find that policy that was specific to. Yeah, and that's why I was thinking that this might be.
Well, this says on property owned by the school,
right,
or on a bus.
Or on a bus, but then as you continue to read it, it keeps kind of more like referring to bus behavior.
Well, I think we should have a policy governing the cameras in our buildings and outside on our properties.
Correct.
Whether it needs to include the buses or not, we already have that policy.
Right.
So I guess they could be separate, but I think we should have a policy governing surveillance within our properties.
Well, then let me look at PSBA for an updated 820 and see what their 820 might be and see if it is more directed towards surveillance cameras in buildings.
Okay, thank you for looking into that.
That'd be great.
Okay? That was that one. Okay, so we're going to skip 820 for now and we'll bring it back for discussion. Okay.
All right.
Next, I'm going to hand over some conversation on graduation to Megan Weber, who's here representing the high school. And we would like to make the recommendation is that we would like to change the graduation policy completely to a newer policy that has been presented by PSBA. So I'll let Megan talk to that.
As an administrative team at the high school, along with the counselors, we went through the graduation requirements as requested. And as you will see in 215, policy 215, it is very defined as to how many credits are required for each subject area. And we felt, as looking through it, along with the administrative guidelines, that having it in the policy is not a problem, except oftentimes we're updating the course selection guide, we're trying to keep that current, and then the policy, I think, quite honestly, has been overlooked in previous years. And then we said, well, let's see what other people do, and let's go back to the PSBA. And the PSBA sample does what we were thinking. Keeps it what we expect for the requirements for graduation, but it says refer to your course selection guide, refer to your website. So that way we don't have everything in 16 places, that every year you do an annual review of the course selection guide and the graduation policies and requirements, that if we went with the PSBA verbiage, we would be covered in the future, that you guys would annually be approving our graduation requirements, and therefore why would we put something in we know may be out of date and take a 3-month process when we know that there's going to be intensive look and view in our course selection guide and or handbook every year. So that's really where we were at and we started by line, and when you throw in the fact that the voc tech graduation requirements are changing at times, we really felt like let's make sure that we are going to do something going forward that we can truly commit to being up to date, and the PSBA was really the language that we felt was appropriate.
And I read through it. I didn't see anything that needed to be changed or altered in order for it to better fit the high school. So as presented, I would recommend to the committee to review the PSBA graduation number 217 policy and let us adopt this as our new graduation requirement policy.
When would we go about and who would draft I'm looking here on page 217, page 1. It says, like, in terms of the actual graduation requirements, not the policy, who would be able to, let me try to rephrase this. So the board would set them upon the recommendation of the administration?
Correct.
And would that just be set up? Like, what would that document look like? Would it just include, for example, you need to receive 5 credits of physical education, for example, kind of like the old policy? Or could we could add as much or as little as we want to that, correct? As long as it conforms with, like, State Board of Education requirements. It
would actually probably most likely come before curriculum instruction. When we go through the course selection guide process and we're talking about all the course offerings and everything, we would never, as an administration, no matter who sits in those seats or in those positions, ever look to do anything that is not meeting the state minimum requirement. And then the things in addition to that, we can have the same conversations as we're talking about adding courses or like curriculum instruction, you mentioned the personal finance. We can continue to have those conversations, and when we make graduation requirement changes, it would just be on the course selection documentation that those changes would be reflecting. Did I answer your question?
All right. Yeah. If you could just, and I'm not trying to shut this down because just looking through it and having read it before, I don't have any problems really, but could you just articulate the benefits of this policy to the old one. This one seems more flexible.
I think that we will be able to have an accurate policy in place if we adopt the one that is somewhat, as you phrase, more flexible. I'm thinking more general, because every time things get changed, the hard part is if you look at the original document from February 23rd, 2009, the last time it was revisited, there are graduation requirements for the class of 2009, 2010, and 2011. Then it's the class of this. As you can't change things prior to students beginning high school, so there's constantly going to have to be an updated change as you make things, and it becomes a very specific and extraneous document that if the state changes something, then you have to go through the review process and update your course selection guide. To me, it just makes it more manageable by putting it more general. Not that I want to every year have an argument about how many credits everything should be. I think that's where our administration or superintendent helps, maintain the focus. But I truly just think it's more manageable and more accurate.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea, Connor, in that if you read the present policy, it still talks about driver's ed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which we no longer offer. So.
And then what we'll do, Connor, is we will look at the guidelines that are included with this. Policy 211, the administrative guidelines grading of student progress. We do need to make changes to that because we have restructured our grading process through the Curriculum Instruction Committee's approval of no longer having a 92 to 100% as an A, that now it's a 90 to 100. So we need to go through that administrative guideline with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're current.
Yeah.
And not keeping this as inflexible. I think that we need to make it more manageable with what's going on in high schools. If we ever want to add any type of cyber education, this could limit us from doing that based upon our policy. So we need to look at it and bring it up to the 21st century, I think.
Yeah. What I think would be good instead of this PSBA sample one is if you actually wrote out a Daniel Boone area school district.
Oh yeah, it gets adopted.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But an actual draft for this school district.
I'd also like to actually see, at the risk of adding some specificity, that the graduation requirements in the course selection. I mean, can't we, instead of just leaving it all broad like that, to be published undistributed, can't we, if somebody hits the policies, give them some direction? Well, where do I find it?
Yeah.
We'll reference that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Where are you looking, Carol?
Third paragraph.
On
authority.
Third paragraph.
Okay, so
whoever mentioned it would be in the course selection book and that's the document we.
Okay, so in there I need to add something. What do you want me to add at the end of the paragraph?
Well, this has to be fleshed out more anyway.
I was going to say the board requires.
I think we were hoping to vote on it.
Well, no, I'd like to have the recommended changes or additions to it so that the next meeting that we come to, that they're added in there.
Made available in each school building via the course selection guide.
Right, I would love that.
So a second sentence, and made available in each
or
school
the website
building via the course selection guide and or on the district's website.
You're going to have to repeat that again. Okay, no, wait. The board requires graduation requirements to be published and distributed to students and parents, guardians, and made available in each school building or on the district's website.
Okay,
you want me to add there?
But after in each school building, then via the course selection guide, or we should say the approved course selection guide, or on the district's website.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. Got that.
And quite honestly, going to the actual administrative guideline 215, the second piece there, you guys have papers. When we review this, it is essentially copied and pasted of the.
It's 211.
No, there's two of them.
You have
there's 215 and the 211. Or do you only have the 211?
I only have the administrative guideline 211, but that's okay.
Well, the administrative guideline 215, it's the same thing as the policy.
Okay.
It just needs to be updated.
Okay. So if you, we'll put the administrative guidelines on for 215 and 211 for.
Yeah, because 211 is going to, like you said, define fine tooth comb, it goes, those two go hand in hand in support of the policy.
Okay. We can come forward with some recommendations.
Yeah, but thank you for doing the work on that.
Yes.
I wasn't fully aware how outdated our old policy was, and this is good.
Well, and even though the guidelines were, the one guideline that I was looking at was updated in March 2013, it still is outdated with regard to our grading system. So we have to make sure that's current. I think it's too specific. It doesn't need to be that specific.
Like it specifically refers to the Pinnacle gradebook system, which we no longer use.
Right.
It's one that means
It's too dynamic of an environment now.
Okay. So for next meeting, we will come with the changes to the PSBA, have it on Daniel Boone letterhead, and then we will also be able to have better discussion on the guidelines with you. Okay.
All right.
All right. Next on my agenda is school visitors policy, and it is number 904, the policy and the guideline for school visitors. I don't have a problem with these. I just think that we need to have them to be looked at and reviewed so that we can present for just to say that we reviewed them. Nothing jumped out other than a typo on the administrative guideline on page 1 at the bottom, under where it says vendors, service representatives, etc. shall be subject to the following rules. At the end of number 1, exception 8 is, there's a number 8, so I found a typo, but I think that this policy is fine. I think we just need to have it dated as reviewed, whatever meeting date we want to.
I'm just curious, being my first year on the board, is that normal? That every policy needs to be said that it was reviewed?
If you look at it, you have to state that it was reviewed, so that you know that somebody looked at it. And
if I could jump in here, the original purpose of this committee, and it still is the purpose, was to go through each policy and review them, because many of them, for example, the one we're looking at now, are pretty out of date. So that line was added to our policies just to demonstrate that it had been checked out at some point and hasn't just been sitting collecting dust for so long. But that is the original purpose of this committee.
So I can just have Sandy push it through that it's been reviewed on October 27th, 2014 by this, and these two can stay the same. There's not a problem. I don't see any changes that we would really need to make with regard to school visitors. This is just for visitors.
Did you by any chance compare it to the current language in PASMA?
I did not. I didn't look at it, but I can certainly do that. Yeah.
Now, when we review a policy, before it's printed on the actual document, I think and please correct me if I'm wrong, fellow committee members, does it have to go to the full board and the board acknowledges it was reviewed, or is it just this committee?
I'm not sure. I will check into that because this is my first, I think that it does have to be adopted that it was reviewed, but I will double check.
Too.
Yeah. But I'll bring this back if there's for discussion, so that I can look at the current PSBA policy to see if there's any changes that they might have had that we didn't see.
Just worried about that other adult residents of the community. I'm not sure about the language that.
Well, sometimes, like if it's a grandparent that comes in who's not part of the community, because they come in, like we have Grandparents' Day, and so then grandparents come in. If your child doesn't have a grandparent, but they're really close to an aunt or uncle, we allow them. So that's kind of where the other comes.
Well, even like our graduates, once they're over 18, does that have to be all specified in there? Adults over the age of 18? Or?
Only with, that would be,
I just wonder, maybe the language would be worked out, 904. And where? The first language, the first paragraph. I'm just wondering if that language is a little bit vague. That maybe we need.
Oh, you'd like to see them over the age of? You'd like that? Okay,
I don't know.
All right, I'll look at it. I'll look at
in light of recent litigation or scares.
Right. I will compare the two, and I'll bring any recommendations to the board after I compare.
Thank you.
Okay. That was school visitors, community school visitors. Community number 909, this was looked at in 2011, but I wanted to make a change to this because if you go down to number 6, and I'm sorry that I'd be pushing you down so far, but under number 6 on the first page, it says all volunteers must submit to the district an Act 34 state police background check and an Act 151 child abuse background check. Volunteers will be given a period of 30 days in order for clearances to arrive as long as proof of submission for clearances has been provided. I want to cross that out. I don't want anyone to have opportunity to be in our buildings for 30 days before I have their clearances in my hand.
Yeah.
So I want that removed. I also want it removed during this period. Volunteers may assist but not be permitted to be alone with students. So obviously I'm wiping that out. And then I'm adding both clearances must be updated annually. A lot of policy that I've seen is they don't necessarily, if you don't have a break in your volunteer service, just like our substitutes, if our substitutes sub every year back to back, they don't have to show us new clearances each year. And to take the burden off of our regulars, I was thinking we could extend it and say unless there's no break in volunteer service with the district. Hence, maybe music boosters, people who their children start in 9th grade, they know that they're going to be volunteering 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. There wouldn't be a break in their service. Therefore, they don't have to worry about going out and getting new clearances. What does the committee think about that? I mean, our teachers aren't required to, our aides aren't required to, no one else is required to get new clearances each year.
Bus drivers are.
Even if they don't have a break in their service.
I'm pretty sure. I don't see the hardship of having to get clearances. You don't know what's happened in the past year.
I would like some sort of approval process annually.
Well, the approval process would still be there. They'd
I'm
still.
not sure. No, I mean clearances. I don't know what the Act 34 is. Is that the child line?
Act 34 is the just the general state police background checked, and then 151 is the child abuse.
So they're just those two $10 clearances, and they're real easy.
Well, the child abuse one is not. That's that can take anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks to get back. No, and I mean, if you know that you're going to come in, that's fine. If you know that each July, but I want to be clear in all of our volunteer policies, because we have, a couple of them, that we're saying the same thing over and over, because when we go to the next policy, we're not making the same statement. So I would like to have consistency that either we are requiring them to have updated policies every year or we're not. And that's it for everybody.
You mentioned aides and teachers. They're employees. And you basically...
But we're treating the volunteers as employees the way that all of our policies are stated.
Except the aides and teachers, an administrator basically does have daily contact with them for the entire year. The volunteers, you don't.
Correct, not for the whole entire year. If they're here for a season or if they're here for, So it's to this committee's discretion. I
have a quick question. Could we create a policy about background checks and clearances that would require our staff, all of our staff, our volunteers? That policy would require everybody to do it annually. Instead of wrapping it up just in the volunteer policy, have a policy just about clearances for everybody in the district.
Well, by law, there's no requirement by law, by state law, that would require teachers that would be a mess. Connor, if you would expect all of your teachers, all of your administrators, everyone to have new clearances each year.
And it may be a contractual issue too, Connor.
But with your volunteers who they're volunteering, that's entirely up to you, because like, Mr. Martino is saying, we don't have contact with them 24/7. We're not in the, building with them. I think more or less, if there was something that came up in the newspaper, we'd see it, but we may not think it's really so-and-so in comparison to what we would do.
Well, I definitely think we should extend it to the volunteers, having it a yearly thing.
Okay.
I'm perfectly fine with that. But I also think if it's not prohibited by state law, I think we should consider, because we could go above and beyond what's required by the state in our own policies, if my understanding is correct. We can't lessen what the state does, but we can increase it. I don't know. I think with everything that's been going on, sadly, I think that it wouldn't be too much to ask to have everybody do a background check, especially if they're in daily contact with students. But that's just my view.
One thing that has changed too is that as employees, we are required by law to report to
Correct.
the superintendent anything that we may be occurring, and I forget the
It's Act 30. It's Act 34, and it is if you've been arrested, you must report to your superintendent or principal in the 24 hours reporting why you were arrested. So there is an act that protects us with all of our employees. Those are aides, those are teachers, administrators. Everyone that works for us does have to meet that criteria. And if they wouldn't report it, then they would be subject to dismissal.
Okay.
So. But under the extracurricular volunteer, if you would like to keep the language in there that clearances must be updated annually, we can do that. That's no problem. I was just making a suggestion.
I didn't think it was a big burden. The only problem was I didn't realize how long that whole process is.
Right.
With the state.
The Act 34 one does. Act 34 is easy. You go online, you get it right away. Your criminal clearance, right away. But it's the child abuse clearance that takes up to 4 weeks. So we just need to make sure that we get the word out. So that's not a problem. So all I would like to change, though, is that volunteers will be given a period of 30 days. I want that crossed out. I don't want them to have it. We're not using the Raptor system at all. If you go to number 7, I would like to keep a person may not assume the position of a volunteer, render any service, or assume any responsibility of a volunteer until and unless items 1 through 6 have been accomplished. I'm saying I don't know if you want to continue to do what I crossed out, where it says board approved volunteers will be reimbursed for the cost of Act 34 and 151 clearances upon request. I was saying let's remove that.
Now the question I have is, what's the definition of a volunteer as it relates to the interaction with a student?
I have that on the next page.
The reason I ask is there's people that go to a football game and do nothing but take things and move them onto the field and then take them off.
Right. And
that's not really
that I think will be under school volunteers. This is more, number 909 is specific to the extracurricular, and I know that is extracurricular volunteer when you're working with the band, and maybe I take a volunteer as an individual, if I take the definition and put that on here, define volunteers so that we more or less are redundant and that we do break it down, because I don't think that a volunteer who's not in direct, I don't want to say contact, because in some way you may have contact, but if you're not working with a small group or you're not, directing a group, right, then you get to just be a volunteer. You fill out your volunteer application. We know that Mike Wolf's a volunteer. He's driving the gator to pull the band equipment out onto the field. That's the extent of his volunteer, and then he's on his way.
Almost like we need another term,
right.
I think is what you're saying. A parent who helps a parent helper that drags equipment to and from the field, just helps the coach, should not be considered a volunteer.
Right. And this is we really don't have a policy 909. This is an administrative guideline. When you look at policy 909 under the actual policy part, what pops up is the administrative guideline. Mm-hmm. So let me go back to PSBA, look for what policy 909 is, and there may be the definition of what, yes.
Please.
So I just wanted to make that change, and then if you look at the administrative guideline that we're still working on, 909, and go to the second page.
Wait, if you would, stay on the first page.
Okay.
If I may, how many volunteers are we talking?
Oh, we got lots of volunteers. Each sport has probably 2 to 3 volunteers, depending on the sport.
Give me a ballpark figure.
We've been getting in the approvals every meeting.
Hundreds. There could be
volunteers in the snack shacks and the food places.
The reason I ask, what we're talking about is 2 $10 fees. And I don't want to spend any money we don't have to spend, but I think the fact that people are willing to give their time for nothing. And I don't think it's that terrible that we spent $20 to get them.
It's just the burden on the administration that bothers me more.
And on top of that, how many actually submit their clearance?
I don't know that a lot do. We get some, but that again, that's up to you. That's fine.
I think we should keep it in. But I have another quick question, if you don't mind. How do we keep track of who is a volunteer, and when does their service as a volunteer expire? Like, we approve people. Are they approved for life? Is there a sunset period?
They're supposed to annually be approved each year. When they, if they want to volunteer to chaperone on a field trip, they need to be approved prior to that field trip. If there's an extracurricular volunteer, they need to be approved prior to that sport or that activity starting. So, depending on whether you're associated to a club or if you're associated to a sport or to band, you need to submit your for approval to be volunteer. So they're done annually, Connor.
Okay, and we have, is it the buildings or is it the central office that keeps the roster, so to speak, of volunteers? Just so we're sure about, like you mentioned how each sport will have a volunteer.
The coaches are responsible. Athletics would keep the volunteers there. It's very difficult to keep ongoing volunteer lists other than our agendas where they're all approved.
That's really what I'm getting at. What happens after we approve these volunteers and they begin their service? At that point, I just want to make sure that the administration is making sure that if their year is up, they come back and are
right. They know. Yes, the building administrators are on top of their people who are looking to be chaperones or need to have clearances in order to be in their buildings. Same with athletics, is making sure that those are updated. Yes. In answer to your question, there is something. We are not holding a master list in the administration building, though.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how, because we have all these procedures, and I'm not sure if, I just want to make sure, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out almost, and sorry I can't articulate this very well. We have all of this stuff on paper, and we go through all this work to make sure that everybody is good when they come in, but is anybody really checking up a year after to make sure that they're stricken from the volunteer roles? What happens when you are? I mean, you need to communicate that to the coaches to let the volunteer know that they need to be reappointed. And there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, and I just want to make sure it's being done, I guess. And I'm taking your word for it if you say it is.
Each year, the volunteer coaches have to be approved, Connor. Every year, the volunteer coaches have to be approved. Every year, there's a change in chaperone volunteers. That's like happening annually, and that's an annual approval. So it's like once you're approved for a grade level field trip, then you're done. You more or less have moved away from that. And if you want to do the next field trip the next year, then you need to reapply to be a volunteer for that field trip, and you need to have the criteria required. So it does continue to wipe itself out and then renew itself.
And it's whoever directly supervises, like the marching band director or the boosters, like that person, when they're planning their field trip or their events or their seasons, they're the ones, in my experience, they're the ones looking at the list and saying, okay, here's my list. Wait, you haven't been approved, or when were you approved last? And they can reach out to the district office for the
All right, great. I guess that was really where my question was going. Yeah. Who is doing the enforcing of this policy? Is it somebody in the district office?
Mm-hmm. I was asked for my driver's license to show I had a valid driver's license to drive the district, equipment.
Right.
And they also have, of course, but that's getting back to our earlier conversation, there's a difference between a chaperone and a volunteer.
Right, and there is, and that's that's under school volunteers, which, covers something else. So that's why I'm bringing these three policies to this board so that we can, because the school volunteer is like 14 pages, and I'm going to be recommending a 4-page volunteer policy to replace that one, and we may not get to it in its entirety tonight, but I just wanted to make this committee aware that there's so much redundancy, and then it's different. You never know exactly what you are supposed to be doing, and I want to try to clarify that as much as possible. So,
if I could just, and I don't want to take way too much time, I think it's good that we cut down on the redundancy. I do remember, though, that the volunteer policy, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of work went into that. I believe on this committee in its first setup under the previous board, to make sure, because the big overarching theme was our volunteers are legally held to the same, they can be held to the same account as our paid staff.
Absolutely.
That was the point that it was all getting at.
And that's very clear in the 4 pages, because the 14 pages, and I'm not discrediting the group, it was adopted in 2012. It allows for a lot of interpretation within that policy. And when you're working with it, like myself or a building principal, there's kind of like loophole areas of way you can get around things, and I would like to be a little bit more straightforward.
Can I suggest we bring the 909, the 914, and the 916, your suggestions for revisions all to the next meeting?
Sure.
And sit down and look at them all as one group rather than try to piecemeal them down. So if you look at 916, the research they did from PASBA, you guys, thank you. You already got a lot of the discussion.
Right,
and I'm casual volunteer, program volunteer, and chaperone definitions.
And I added
a little.
See
that incorporated into these 2 policies that you're proposing.
And
just start kind of.
Right. I think that there is definitely a difference between extracurricular volunteer and between a school volunteer, but I think that we need to just clarify. We need the policy for 909. That's what we're missing, because we're looking at the administrative guideline. So that's what I want to bring to the committee.
Right, okay.
But within the guideline, yeah.
If you could bring 914 at the same time, I think it would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And if you notice on number 5 of this 909, it branches into school related. School related. Number 5, school related or extracurricular activities.
Right. And
the language is getting all muddy because school related is supposed to be the other policy.
Right. So I think we need to really kind of go through that, each of us, and more or less bring what the recommendations are to the committee. That would be fine.
Look at PASBA.
You said it earlier. I think you need to define.
Right,
what each of them are.
And that will be achieved if there is truly a 909 policy opposed to the guidelines. So that I'll look for as well. So I think, if we want to push those on, we'll have plenty to do the next policy meeting if we're looking at these 3, 904, 909, and 914, and then a facilities committee, if they've, have finished up, then I could bring those others to us.
Wrap up those other ones.
Right, but I'll keep bringing them up, but I think we'll have plenty of work to do with just what we discussed tonight. And then moving forward, the high school would like to review, not the high school, but it was asked to review, I guess it's the middle school just as much, I'm sorry, discipline policy 216 and 221, number 218 are drug alcohol awareness, and 204 attendance. So I have some more policies that I would like to bring, that we're reviewing as well. But it's a lot. On those same lines, does this committee want to bring to the board the recommendation, like Mrs. Weitz had recommended back in the spring, about PSBA and our
policy development service?
Right. And the cost here is, I think we can offer a rate of $4,500, including 1 free year of administrative regulation updates. If the district would like to have an outside consultation conducted to initiate the administrative regulation services, the cost of the annual would be $6,500 within the 1 year of contracting. But this policy development, there are so many policies that are so old. This would help to really bring us up to date with regard to policies and where they need to be. So,
what do they actually do?
They actually go through, here's what they do. They eliminate duplication of efforts, detailing appropriate procedures, facilitating consistent policy implementation, supporting staff training efforts, enhance administrative control of district procedures. There's periodic administrative, I'm assuming AR means administrative regulations, updates through them described, but like I can share the whole printout with everybody rather than me reading it. But
they do a comprehensive review based
there we
on
go.
pertinent federal and state laws and regulations, court and arbitration decisions, and educational and liability issues, in conjunction with an analysis of the current adopted policy manual, student and employee handbooks, including collective bargaining agreements and budget documents. It includes a comprehensive on-site review of all the board minutes for the past 3 years, a complete review of all pertinent handbooks and CBAs used in the district, along with an analysis of existing adopted policies, writing, processing, electronic submission of customized first draft policies with legal citations to be submitted for board consideration, a work session with the board, administration, and a PASBA consultant, all processing and electronic transmission of intermediary changes and return of amended policies for board consideration and final review, and the adopted policy manual on a USB drive. I think it's huge.
It is huge, especially if they're getting into, and especially if they're covering, and I didn't realize that they were looking at what was it? The like guide, what the handbooks? Yes, because there is a professional handbook that really needs revision and looked at thoroughly, and it's very time consuming, and it's something
and
that
make sure we're not in conflict with anything in our collective
right.
bargaining agreement. I think this is huge. I can't emphasize something enough, and I wish we would go forward with that.
You there, Connor? What do you think?
I have $7,300 as their quote.
I'm here. I think it would be beneficial for the district. That being said, I think that the board has spent a lot of money on, in recent months particularly, on, for example, the reserve study, the microphones. We've been spending a lot of money on board-level things, more so than in previous years. And I don't want to see that continue at the rate that it's going. So I want to think about this a little bit on a personal level. I think that it is beneficial to get a third party to look at this, but that being said, frankly, I was disappointed with what we got with the reserve study, and I don't think it merited the cost we paid. That being said, I voted for the reserve study, and I expected it to give us a little bit more information, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I just want to make sure we'd be getting our value out of it. So I have to do a little bit more research on my own. That's my own view at this point.
Connor, I was sitting here thinking the same thing about the money we've been spending as a board. On the other hand, they can spread this $7,300 out over 3 years if we ask them to do that. That's what, $2,400 a year, which really does not impact the budget that much. The only other question I have about it is they can submit policy after policy. Our policy committee is still going to have to go over it line by line, so it's not like, they're going to do it and we're just work free.
Right, it just reduces,
I think we would look at it with a fine-tooth comb, though, worrying about all the legal ramifications, because they're going to have incorporated court and arbitration decisions, educational liability issues.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm just saying we would still have to sit and review each one.
Look. I think it would just be a cursory look, though, and I think if it saves us one litigation, the $7,300 is well spent.
Well, it's something that if you wanted to put on the next agenda to bring forward to take a vote on.
We'll forward our emails that we've got
to the rest of the
committee and let them consider it for the next meeting. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I just know that these are very time consuming, and at this rate, which is the snail's pace, we're not going to get very far.
We don't have HR people, so
right.
sometimes we have to pay for these things.
I'm fine moving it forward to the full board.
Okay. Just a recommendation.
I'm only one. It seems like Mrs. Bites is fine with that. Mr. Martino.
I don't have a vote.
And Mr.
No,
okay.
Do you want to move it to the full board, or do you want to think
I'm
about
still
it?
thinking about it, but I would rather discuss it with the whole board and have everyone's thought on it.
so we can discuss.
All right, so it looks like we could take that to the full board for discussion and consideration.
Okay. So our work is almost complete with regard to our boosters policy. I will make the tweaks to that, bring them to the next meeting, and then we'll ask for the committee's approval to take it to the, if we have it ready for the voting session, which would be next, at the end of November,
It'd be 2 meetings from now.
then we would be able to put it on for the first reading. So, okay.
All right.
I think
What about
that's...
So-
service animals?
That one is on for first reading tonight.
So there's no.
Nope, nothing else that we have to follow up with that. No, that one's done and moving forward. Yep,
So are we good now for public comment?
we are. Any public comment? Okay, Connor, there's no public comment.
All right. Our next meeting, continuing with our pattern of having these meetings before the voting meeting, will be on November 24th. Same place, same time. Any further comments?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right, then. The meeting is adjourned at 7:11 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
I won't be able